I'll be starting in three, two, one. We think that currently there is a social stigma on gap years. That's to say that if we were not to support the rights of students taking gap years, it looks like currently in our society, like because gap years do kind of challenge that traditional idea about like education and productivity, i.e., like it defies like cultural norms about education, because it deviates from like default like pathways, for example, like going from high school directly to university and like having that productivity bias, thinking that gap years are just like students being lazy. I think because of these like perceptions from society that we currently have, it means that like students who actually want to take gap years are probably less likely to do so just because they prioritize like social expectations maybe over like trying something new or their own like like mental health, right? And I think that this is inherently bad. So what will I do in this speech today? I'll be doing a few pieces of framing about what does like a gap year actually look like and what does supporting the rise of students doing gap years look like, and then two pieces of substantive. First of all, what are gap years? I think we define gap years as like really purposeful and really structured periods of like personal and professional development through like students just stepping outside like predefined academic tracks and just making independent decisions about like work, travel, and skills that just give them a stronger sense of identity and like clearer views, and clearer values, and like and their interests, right? And having like gaining more new interests. I think secondly, it also like gives them like professional development, for example, through like volunteering or like entrepreneur and like doing like jobs and stuff like that, right? And I think lastly, it just like gives them like better mental health, like recovery through an opportunity to take a break from like constant performance evaluation, right? And I think that this is like essentially what gap years actually do, right? And I think that they are extremely beneficial. I will continue to prove this along through my case. And I think just what does supporting the rise of students doing gap years look like? I think it means like normalizing gap years, as in saying that like it's a gap years are inherently good just because we're taking a break from like the default traditional like pathway through education. It's just like it does not necessarily mean it's bad. I think it also removes the stigma of like laziness or like falling behind when students do take gap years. And I think that this support means that students who use gap years are going to use gap years more strategically, right? And like probably more confidently, right? When they enter gap years, they're probably going to have more specific objectives. They're going to use their time more structurally, right? And people who like probably were like less convinced to take gap years, or actually wanted to, but thought like this actually was like, but thought this was like looked down upon society, were probably more likely to do so. And I think that they're probably going to be able to achieve like more specific academic or professional goals. And like this support just improves the quality of gap years in general, right? So two pieces of substantive in this debate today. First of all, how this creates better mental health, right? And I think having like I think like there are a few pieces of mechanism. First, and that is just to say that having like more like having a gap year and having like more preventative breaks just reduces burnout. And I think supporting the rise of gap years just increases the number, or like it increases it like potential students who were going to take gap years, right? And I think this is inherently good to take gap years because students who feel that they are like really burdened by studying nonstop, especially in the last few years of high school, right, where that is like really stressful time, or like just like stress from their studies in general, they're probably more likely to take a gap year off in between to like relieve the stress. And I think that this is extremely unlikely in the opposition's world for one reason, and I think that's just to say that because of like the rigid academic timelines that we have right now, right? In off world, they just don't support the rise of gap years, meaning that the like current social stigma of gap years being like unproductive and like untraditional gives students like a fear of falling behind peers, right? They're more likely to prioritize societal expectations over their own stress because like humans are just like probably more wired to like prioritize social feedback over there, like even if they have like some own risk, like and like the risk of like having really bad mental health. And I think secondly, just because people just do internalize like social norms and pressure, so it's like society tells you having a gap year is like a waste of time. You're probably going to think, oh, even though I think I might really need this like 1 year just to like get my like things together and stuff, I probably just won't take it and go into university, right? And I think that this means that at the end, right, stress does accumulate instead of just being mitigated. I think that meant that the outcome for these students in particular who are really stressed is just like worse, way worse on their side, and that is a burden for them to have, right? And I think how does taking a gap year really help your mental health in general? I think specifically for students who like are currently really stressed and just didn't like wanted to take a gap in the first place, but just didn't because of upside work. I think if they are in our work, like more, they're probably going to be more likely to like step away from continuous academic pressure and just give their body time to reset and recover in these gap years, right? I think these gap years just will act as a preventative mental health break for them. And I think that this is incredibly important because obviously we don't want like the stress to build up and create a bigger burden. Second, I think for broader stakeholders and just students in general, it just increases like autonomy and sense of control, like because they're able to like choose voluntarily and students can control their own goals, right? I think therefore this like control like really helps enhance their self-efficacy. I think that was really important for them to get. And lastly, I think I just like to know like if we do support the rise of gap years, it probably will mean that like more students are able to like like try having a gap year and like be interested in it in the first place, right? And I think lastly, this means that it just encourages more identity exploration. Like it broadens their sense of self beyond academic performance. I think overall students are allowed to reform their like come back to education and school in like being more healthier and more focused and just have better mental health, which this actually helps their academic performance when they do go into uni, right? And I think that was another benefit that we were able to get, right? So second argument about how does this create like more life skills. I think as the info slide has explained, a gap year is a planned break, usually between high school and university, where students just travel, work, volunteer, and develop their skills. I think it is often the first real glimpse of what life will look like after their formal education, allowing them to decide what they want to do without outside pressure, such as teachers and parents, meaning more personal freedom, right? I think that there are four benefits for like life skills they're able to get. First of all, independence, because like a gap year is planned, right? Which means that the student does have to plan everything out and learn how to budget their income, possibly outside working and learning valuable life skills of living alone or with friends, such as cooking, finding accommodation, or like washing clothes, right? I think secondly, problem solving. Students have to learn to like solve any unexpected problems in the real world, allowing them to apply all the knowledge that they have acquired in real situations without the guidance of teachers or parents. I think thirdly, resilience. In the gap year, students often like go out to try for new jobs or like live somewhere new or like try new skills, right? And I think this just means that they have to deal with any possible like rejections and setbacks and learn to like grow from that. And I think lastly, they just learn about themselves, right? Because students often learn about themselves and will be able to learn much more and discover what they want to do in university, which allows more confidence in what they do. I think there are two impacts to this, broadly speaking. First of all, we just have like better students, like they can manage their time more efficiently and have more independence and just manage stress better. And I think secondly, we thought that this meant like students could work and study more efficiently afterwards, after the gap year, where they got this valuable time off. So I think this also like benefits their education boards. So lastly, about the comparative, what do we see from both worlds? I think in our world, where if we do support the rise of gap years, we think we challenge and change social stigma, and that means more students who were hesitant to explore and like take a break will like be able to do so, right? They're more likely to do so, be more inclined to do so, and they just experience more autonomy and agency. And this is inherently important to character building. I think in next world, they were like their stress will accumulate. Less students are like likely to like take this gap year even when they need it, which means that like increased chance of burnout and chronic stress. So proud to propose.
We do a rebuttal of our opponent arguments and secondly give our contentions. Firstly, their opponent mainly talk about two things. Firstly, about achieving goals and about better mental health and burnout. Secondly, about more continuous step away from continuous learning. They have more exploration and more life skills learning. So firstly, achieve goals and better mental health reduces burnout. So is it exactly true? Exactly not true, because it will add in mental health and increase burnout since they have stepped away from the high pressure of learning. While they after the gap year they step into the learning, it will be more difficult for them to adapt the new environment to the university, since university are very busy at learning skills and prepare for the career. While they are giving to the gap year, they are very difficult to step into schools next time. Very difficult and adding pressure for them. In this time, they don't consider a gap in the status quo that is rich and poor gap. Only rich people have the time or have the resources to give the exploration or life skills or practicing problem solving skills. However, for the poor stages of the people, that is vulnerability, even the gap years, they don't have anything to do. Instead, they're trying to worry about their money or others. So this problem solving skills or the more exploration for the poor people is just like wasting time and not learning anything in this 1 year. So now I think our opponent's side talking about two main arguments does not give out main logic for this. And moving on to my arguments here, that is also rebutting our opponent and achieving our side. Firstly, about our side is gap years disrupt academic community. The prolonged break from systematic academic training leads to fading of knowledge retention. since the decline of logical thinking abilities, like maybe the erosions of study habits, the learning rhythm and thinking patterns developed on a high school need to come consolidated or talked through in the intensive coursework instead of giving them gap years to rest, travel, learn the other things, iteration. Once if it is interrupted, the process of adapting that in the classroom teaching after the gap years will be very high pressured, and the professional knowledge frameworks in the gap years cannot be successfully learned by students. So secondly, I think Secondly, the gap years also widen the inequalities in the educational resource allocation. Since we have talked about it in our rebuttal, the popular narrative of the years often equates experience to global acceleration or high quality internship. But Judge, this is our opponent talking about, but it is not true always. But such experiences are inherently resource dependent. It needs to depend on our resources. Not all students have the financial means to cover the cost of travel or program learning, have the classes, especially for the poor students, and they want to achieve better scores and better careers. The gap years may not be a choice for growth, but instead force the break from making ends meet for the vulnerabilities which fails to bring meaningful improvement. So you might consider about also how about rich students? They have the resource, but let's tell you, the so-called soft skills cultivated during the gap years are not inclusive gap experiences. We give out more alternative for this. We continue universities for from the high schools because universities covers a lot of things better than the gap years. They go sell by learning or traveling. They have the student clubs and campus internship or volunteer product and so on. These things are all benefits for students which can be integrated in academic learning without interrupted studies. So I think this is much more beneficial than our opponent's side. That this means that gap years created a necessary the advantage gap that only with students with sufficient resources, and all students can be benefited through this without a continued school learning. Okay, we'll check it out.
What's your opinion that like even if you can get these benefits in university, it will always be in like a classroom environment, whereas gap years experiences are going to be outside of the classroom, which is like probably more beneficial because it's like copies life experiences better.
Personally, I think that this time, this only benefits for the rich students. I think that is making more inequalities, widen inequalities. That is just our things are saying. And secondly, I think the school projects like clubs and campus internship or the vacation are also giving them experiences for traveling. But we don't need 1 year, the gap year, so much long time to take this to take the experiences. We can also take it out in the small time, but with the continuity of learning. Because we have already talked about the bad impact of how long term of not going to schools, this high pressure of working, learning, and experiences preparing for the career is bad and making more pressure for the students. And we'll talk about less impact and a little bit subpoint about this because gap years also created psychological pressure for students. Why? We will give the now, returning to campus, they might face the stress of catching up peers that we're talking about to advance in their studies and feeling anxious or about their gap because outside world about a gap year is exactly and totally different with the school learning, and it is different from learning math, science, history, or other things that are specific learning to prepare for the careers in the studies. They will feel they need to catch up to other students' career or studies, their homework, their learning, and feeling anxious about whether the gap years experiences are recognized by employers or graduate schools. This psychological burden can give many negative harm and impact in the academic performance and mental well-being. So, Judge, for this reason, I will strongly urge for opposition ballot. Thank you.
The speech, right? Firstly, a few pushes from opposition that I'll respond to. Secondly, one main extension about how it impacts lower SES people, right? I think opposition gave you two main pushes, two substantive pushes, and their responses to our case was essentially the same extensions, right? So I think the first push was just that essentially it's hard to adapt or return to university, and essentially that it disrupts academic progress, right? And it adds stress. I think they gave you a few mechanisms for this. First thing they told you was just that you're unable to like continue your education with like your peers, etc., like stuff. And they also did some weighing about how like the soft skills you gain from this gap year aren't worth it. A few responses to this then. Firstly, I'd just like to note that like that's wrong. I think that like gap years are often used for tutoring. They're used for internships or like preparatory courses and skill building, right? I think that like gap years are often taken for that specific reason, right? I think people feel they aren't ready for uni, so then they take the time to like build skills needed for uni, right? Whether it be like financial skills, social skills, or academic skills, it often looks like engaging in tutoring, etc., right? But like even if that's wrong, I'll just like to say that like factually, you do not enter, like, say you take a gap year, right, from after finishing high school, you do not enter the second year of uni with your peers. You always start from the first year of uni, right? I think a gap year does not move you ahead or skip you into your second year, because unis base your entry level on completed qualifications, not on times or not on age or time since graduation, right? That just means you are starting from the same year of uni as everyone else, even if you are a year older, but now you are starting from like, you're starting uni with the skills you previously lacked, like social skills, etc., right? I think that's like a benefit opposition missed, like factually, right? But also I'd just like to note that thirdly, like third response is just to say that like even if that's wrong, I'll just like to note that the comparative on our side is far better, right? Like I say that like even if a few students lose momentum, even if a few students like lose like friendships they're able to gain, I'll just like to say that students who take gap years are more likely to choose the right course. They're more likely to persist and succeed in uni, which benefits them and society as a whole. Therefore, I just think the trade-off is worth it. But the fourth response is just to say, like, as I'll expand on in my substantive, I'll just like to note that like taking a gap year or supporting the rise of gap years, like it disproportionately benefits lower SCS people, which we do care a lot about, right? Because obviously I think they're given the time to like financially prepare themselves. They're given like the time to like access opportunities like subsidized internships, etc., right? Therefore, I'll just like to think that like because we benefit lower SCS people so much, I'd just like to say that even if the above was true, you should still not credit this point, right? But also I'll just like to know at the end of this response, I'll just think that like it does not lead to like disruptions in academics, but rather it benefits academics, right? Because you're actually able to like go into university with the skills you need, which previously you would have lacked. Second thing they tried to tell you was that like the gap years essentially favor the wealthy and it disproportionately harms lower SCS people. I think note later in my point that I'll also respond to this, but I'll do a few things here. First, they gave you some mechanisms. First thing they say was that like you're essentially working for like you're essentially like taking a year off, like unpaid, etc. That's really bad. Okay, I'll do a few things here. Firstly, I'll just like to say that like why that's wrong. Firstly, I think that like many gap year programs are specifically designed for disadvantaged students, including paid internships, right? Like government funding, volunteering, etc., or scholarships. I think as we told you at first, like in our characterization of gap years, many students who take it just do take it because like they need to like get the money for uni, they need to financially prepare themselves. But also I'll just like to note that like on our side, we give lower SCS people a crucial chance to gain like experience, skills, or like savings for university. Because I like to note that like the majority of people that opposition is trying to state that like go on backpacking trips, that like take a year off abroad, are probably the minority, right? The majority people just do stay in their city. They probably do just take up like volunteer hours at their like local community shelter. They do like take like paid internships, government funding, volunteering, right? But also I'd just like to know, even if that response is wrong, I think opposition still like their point still doesn't stand, right? Because I think even if some programs are expensive, that like the mere option of taking a gap year allows lower SCS students to like strategically work, save, or like take preparatory courses, which they otherwise couldn't, right? But like third response is just to say that like even if that's wrong, the comparative is far better. Even if wealthy students do benefit more from a gap year, I'll just like to say the overall impact on lower SCS students is just like incredibly positive, right? Because like it reduces barriers, it allows them to build confidence and improves like readiness for university, right? But fourth response is just to say that like even if that's false, I'll just like to say that like what we told you at first outweighs this, right? Because I think that, like, if we're able to reduce the stigma around like gap years overall, we're able to benefit society broadly, right? And we're able to impact a much larger scale of people than opposition can prove. Therefore, onto my point about why it benefits lower SES people, few things here. Firstly, categorization, 2 mechanisms, 3 impact, right? Categorization, I think many lower SES people or disadvantaged people in general cannot afford, like, firstly, they can't afford immediate uni entry financially. Secondly, like, socially, they need to take care of their family, right? But thirdly, they either have like some sort of like physical issue, like illness, etc. Fourthly, they have like mental issues, like they're anxious, etc. Right? But also, fifthly, I think their parents might not want them to go to uni, especially in the case of like lower SES people. Their parents want them to like support their family business, etc. But also, sixth, I think that like they often do have less access to like guidance or like about degrees or about college, right? Therefore, why do we think by supporting the rise of gap years, we allow more lower SES people to enter uni? Firstly, I think that like we significantly reduce the dropout risk. People drop out for a few reasons. Firstly, entering uni unprepared can lead to like early dropout because they simply can't keep up. Secondly, they need to help their family or like work instead of uni. I think we give them the option to like go to uni on our side because we're allowing them a gap year where they're able to like work financially, where they're able to support their family, and also like in the case of before, but like also during like their university like degree, they're often able to like take time off to care for family. They're not restricted by like the comparative, right, which is essentially harmful. Therefore, I'd just like to know we benefit low SES people mentally, physically, socially, and financially, and also in the long term, right? Therefore, so proud to affirm. Thank you.
We believe that actually our opponent has ignored wrongly the bad things about resting too much, and there will going to be better and also easier ways for us trying to reduce and stress so that actually do not stop students from learning. And we believe that year of the gap time trying to ease for a lot of stress, and we also still got vacation, winter and summer holiday, and also it was being flexible for a lot of those school breaks or even trying to turning out. So therefore, we believe that they're also going to have more consoling and also cheaper choice. And why would they not take for this option if actually this was trying to be much more beneficial? And they'll also let the students stay in school. And our one also trying to mention that we actually does not letting them go outside the class. But instead, we believe that college actually was being full of diversified, and it was sometimes trying to always for a lot of those different scene may actually known, and also you may actually just trying to get in when we're working. So therefore, we believe that college is already a better option for us trying to experience a lot during for the whole preparation. So therefore, we believe that there's no the gap year trying to happen for this time. And when actually the students was trying to get back into the college, I guess they actually can't spend their extra time trying to catch on for their schoolwork and even trying to keeping up with friends. And this actually brings for some of those worst of those and actually they have ignored and fallen behind. So therefore, we believe that actually it actually was being bigger than a lot of those school stress. And Judge, we believe that actually mixed up with a feeling working more efficiently. So we believe that this relationship is actually just one line, but stopping for studying for a long time, and this actually will just trying to cause us a lot of those bad effects. The threat of the street of the academic continuity is not just for the minority believe that actually it impacts for almost any student, for any students who take for the gap year regardless of the background. And for every student actually steps away from the structured learning to trying to face it for the risk of erotic studying habit actually was trying to slowing down for their readapt. And this can also trying to cause us for delayed of the graduation and even for some of those other war effects. So therefore we believe that actually it wasn't going to be standing and it was being really unstable. Apple also mentioned in their second argument of saying that gap year helps students trying to learn more important skills, but we believe that actually students can trying to learning their skills and without trying to stopping with their study. They can try to continuing for both. And also for most of the skills during learning for the gap year is actually being simple with some of those general and basic skills. So there's nothing have to do with actually their future and also their career goals. So we believe that actually the basic skills, the formative and teens are also talking about is mainly like cooking and also the basic real surviving skills and also trying to planning on with their future, how they're trying to make it on for all of those plans. Also being studied while they're during the college and living on with some of those campus and even spending their part-time trying to doing some part-time jobs, and also trying to managing are also the better ways of how we can try to make in this. So we believe that this is also the better way of how we can try to practicing for those skills, either actually acting like adults and also like the real adult life. And also we believe, from the other hand, the skill from the gap year, we can ensure that whether the cost is actually can be reoccupied, and therefore and this is actually being really unstable, and we cannot make it enough insurance before taking into the actions. Therefore, we believe that actually it doesn't stand too. And doing something simple, also repeating for some of those manual works and sometimes in some of those jobs, which actually short term but not even causing for the long term effect. So therefore, we believe that this cannot just trying to make competitive. So we believe that actually we can. Judge, they also mentioned about we can train to knowing for oneself better, and they actually we can try to discover and also trying to knowing about ourselves better. It's actually aged like 18 or 19 or during for the rare of how they're at getting to college. Short gap year experience is actually like 2 months can trying to halt on them, and this is just like a short campus they can trying to put things for their whole intention on. There's no necessarily need of the gap year, and our funnel was filled to improve and address must meet trying to make in this existence. So therefore, we believe the college itself has already provided a lot of those opportunity, and when we're trying to have in for the gap year, it probably may cause even for delays, and we still have better alternatives and ways. And also, we believe that we have mentioned our first construction. Actually, this can also cause us for a lot of those inequality and also insufficient to.
I think, do you concede that like on your side, a gap year allows like lower SCS people like time to work and like gain financial independence, and like in turn we're supporting the vulnerable stakeholders?
Well, for trying to make it on for their own independence, well, maybe you have trying to mention for independence again, but we believe that when the students are trying to work in and also working on during the college with no need of the gap year, their self was trying to make in for their own independence, and therefore this is a way of even strengthening for their skills and even trying to do it for others as they actually get their experiences. As we believe that this, when we're trying to make and do, we're trying to know about what actually we are being good on, also trying to discovering at others. This is actually was being having a high risk for us our way, and to see what it actually was being good at or not being good at. So we believe the risk is potentially high, and therefore we believe that actually when we're trying to continue for both studying and also for the working experiences during the college, it is the best way trying to solve it for both time efficiency and also for the cost. So therefore this is my request, and also this is my answer for this question. And now moving on back to our rebuttals. So actually, Judge, we believe that actually this kind of those self-understanding is actually trying to be selling for themselves. Like what we actually say in a lot of those college in their general courses, they're trying to make it standing and trying a lot of those major activities, and we also have, for example, other events and also that activities. So therefore, we believe that it trying for the major was trying to relate it for the study and also for the teacher, their own. The students trying to make their improve and also trying to explore their own way in a more interesting and also in a more way. So, Judge, we believe that from all those conditions above, we says that their contention doesn't stand. Thank you.
Judge, Team Negative's focus on academic continuity was one of the main reasons of high rates of burnout and dropout in universities, and that was why I was so proud to propose today. 2 clashes in this debate, first on low SES people and second on the effects of education. So first on low SES, first they had like this main push about how this was only for rich people and low SES people couldn't necessarily access these gap years. I had 3 main things to say to this. First of all, we thought that our info slide clearly stated that gap years included working and skill development. We didn't think that it was only travel, and so we flipped this. We thought that low SES people could actually work and save for money. So instead they could actually go to uni, where in team negative's case, they wouldn't go to have a gap year, and they wouldn't save, so they wouldn't have money for uni. Second, we thought that there were just cheap and expensive versions of gap years, like such as a cheap version might be like backpacking in your own country and like volunteering for free and working to get money, but an expensive version might be more for rich people. So we thought that there was like lots of different ways that you could spend your gap year, so it was accessible for everyone. And third of all, we just thought that there were funds provided by the government and other organizations to help low ACS people to like access these gap years and things like that. And we thought that meant that they could still access these things, and it wasn't only for rich people. Second, they said that like they talked about how for low SS people, universities were much better for having experiences, and like gap years weren't necessarily suitable for these low SS people. First of all, we just talked about how we just thought that gap years were in the real world. They were hands-on experience with like no supervision and like from like teachers and stuff. We thought that in university, these experiences were much more controlled. They didn't necessarily have like all the experiences where you could necessarily learn from like these things, such as maybe like thing that might not that shouldn't have happened. We thought that these experiences were exclusive to gap years, and university couldn't provide everything. We thought that university like spoon-fed you all the information instead of you actually learning it using your own method. And second of all, we thought that universities were even less accessible to low SS people, because we thought without a gap year, low SS people couldn't like work, and they didn't have enough money to access universities in the first place. And even if they did access university, we thought that these programs and like exchanges that you could find in university were much more expensive, were much more out of reach, and we thought that was so much worse. Like compare this to a gap year, which was extremely customizable. You could choose how much money you wanted to spend. Before that was so much better. So what do we see at the end of this clash on like low ACS people? We just saw that gap years were incredibly customizable and cheap, which meant that they were like allowed like lots of customization, which meant that it was accessible for all types of like socioeconomic statuses. But second, we also just thought that like it also allowed low SS people to like work to get money and to actually experience university, which we thought wouldn't happen in team negative side. So any POIs? All right, now on to my second clash on education. First on education, I talked about how once you go on a gap year, it's much harder to like get to adapt when you get back, and they focused on this concept of continuity. So 3 things to say to this. First, we thought that like the gap year was more like an extended holiday that like people did have during the academic year. We thought that it focused on taking a break that was well needed after 12 years of primary and secondary education. We thought that these skills that you learned during a gap year was also extremely useful in when you come back to university, such as perseverance, such as time management, such as like stress management. We thought that was so much more important because it meant that they were able to study more efficiently and handle like their time and stress much better, which meant that they were actually able to study better. And second, we thought that after a gap year, you would become like very well rested. You would like have a lot of time relaxing. So you thought that meant that you were more ready for study and like you were better off suited for study. And third, we thought that gap years were structured with a clear plan on how to come back and learn. We thought that there were many like organizations, many settings, many like guides helping you on like how to organize a gap year so that you will be ready to come back and like study better than before. Second, I talked about how people just drop out after a gap year, or like they'll just drop out and decide not to come back to university. We thought that one of the main reasons to drop out was just because either one, they burnt out, and second, they just weren't interested in the course that they like chose. So what do we see on our side? We see, first of all, in the gap year, they learn what they like actually want to do. They have a lot of time for reflection with themselves, and that meant that they could like reflect on what they actually want to do and choose a course that really like spoke to them, that they really like cared about. And second, we thought that like we reduced burnout drastically on our side because they had so much time to rest, and they came back even better, and then therefore they were like much more ready to learn. And third of all, they just had like this final argument about how it was like a very big psychological burden to catch up with this education. One, we flip this. We think that people become more driven because they work hard after learning all of these like life experiences. And second, they also want to learn like this subject much more because they've been able to decide on a course that they actually want to do. And second, we thought that like education was like, it wasn't a linear course. We thought that everyone had their own path for education. So like they really shouldn't be like comparing to other people. So what did we see at the end of this argument on education? What we saw was that people that took a gap year on our side were much more well rested. They didn't want to drop out as much because they were well rested, they were prepared for learning, and that's why I'm so proud to propose.
Firstly, I'll just for like 3 main clashes, and then I'll say why we win these clashes, and then I'll give 2 questions. Firstly, the rebuttal and of the government case, we already tell you that these rest does not require a full gap year. Like the students already have these summer holidays that will also like give them time to like recover and something like that. And then they also talked about a full gap year can make the poor students, like they will give more time for the poor students to save money and go to unis. But then we tell you that like also like winter holidays, we have winter holidays, New Year holidays, and also summer holidays are all giving them for time to like recover. And then gap years can also again we say that gap years can even worsen like these mental health, because like anxiety of falling behind of these peers, that these like poor peoples may can all have like these monies. They will often like save monies to go to unis, and they will not like necessarily go to take classes for like the outside classes. They will often like just save up money. But then we tell you that if they like cannot take like outside classes, then they will then they might worry about if they can keep like up with their peers, and that they'll also like have stress about like re-entering these like academic routine. Like for example, they're going to unis, and unis are like a really big thing, and they after they are going to unis, they might they cannot like go to like the academic routines. And even if they learn a lot of society skills, then these like society skills are only like they can only sustain their societies, like they are living in society. But then they will also like increase their worsen their mental health, because then if they have like better society skills, then these poor people like may cannot like keep up with the peers again. And then also like they also have said that like these life skills and independence, again like these life skills can also like be developed again without these gap years. And for example, like these gap years can these society skills can be also learned in school. Like for example, like schools can give out these student leadership things and clubs, for example, and this will also like build life skills, and this can also like build like society skills also. And then these gap years are not like too necessarily, and we on our side without gap years can give you time to learn, can give you like it can still have like these life skills, and we can also like give you like these we can also give you these benefits like by learning and having enough learning to go to like the unis. And then my opponents also talked about that these government will give you funds to go to unis, and that's exactly why we don't need like these gap years, because if already government are giving these poor people's funds, then why like we just don't like give you the summer holiday and winter holidays and other holidays to give you time to like earn more money, but then we also give you funds to go to unis. So which means that these gap years are not necessarily. And they also said that like gap years again they help more poor students, and we say that like these poor students are more likely to stay like these poor students are more likely to stay like permanent once they leave these education, because again their parents might not want them to go to unis. They'll probably like more want them to go to like help them get like in their family and sustain their family and quickly get them work. But then
these poor students, although they're funded by the government, their family might not want them to. And then also like the two questions. Now, first, my question one is, should education like a system encourage these interruptions of gap years or continuation of these like these learnings? So firstly, the opposition clearly like says that we should like encourage these continually, and we win these because like these education works best with this continuity, and these learning can also like build like on these like habits, and these on like these this like they can also like learn better when they're continuing to learn. And if they like cut out for 1 year, they're not likely to like give like education, they're not likely to build their education, especially for poor people. And our main class is also on these. And also like who benefits more overall, these individuals of poor people's society or in these schools, or like us, or like these individual benefit more than the society. So firstly, we say that the society are if these we want to benefit both. So firstly, the opposition clearly wins this like these this question, because firstly, like we are if we supporting gap years, this will like slow down the skill development, and then our like not supporting this gap year can also give you society benefits while benefiting and the individual to learn, and benefiting the society by giving you like jobs, like by giving you like these clubs, these jobs that you can also like learn in school, which also gives you life skill, which means we have a win-win on this argument. And then these like the government benefits are much smaller than the like than the opposition side. So firstly, like we give you a lot. Okay, I'll accept that.
Do you think that all low SES people would be able to go to university with these like government grants, or would some of them have to like use a gap year to work to be able to go to university?
Okay, I already responded in that. Like for example, we still like give you these. You said you give you these government funds, and you go out if you have gap years to like save money. But we're also giving like these summer holidays, which means you still have a holiday to work on, and you don't necessarily need a whole year to like recover, right? Like a few months is already enough for these like people to have government funds, and also like give like also have these like like these. Wait, let me finish this question. And then you can also like have more like money to work on these summer holidays. And I'll take the second PY.
Didn't we not say down the bench that gap years included whole years, but also like partial breaks at first, second, and third in the characterization that we gave you?
But then you like these gap years, like again, this is a whole year. Like although you do have like these different breaks, but then you don't necessarily need these like separate breaks, and then this gap year, like this whole year for these like these 1, 2, 3, 4 like breaks. You only need like these like summer holidays, winter holidays. You don't like need these like different gaps for this. And then also that we so these opposition win this like ballot, because that we are giving you like more fair like education, and we're also giving you better education for students. So please go for like opposition side, I think.
Condition, the opposition actually outweighs more than the proposition on the real benefits and also the cost. Even though our opponent also said they can try to get in a lot, but they never actually really manage what the sacrifice and also the cost of trying to bring in and better. So therefore, we believe that some not just always trying to ensure the cost actually was being occupied and also being reoccupied. So it might, and also they probably will cause some of those insufficient trying to cover for the major portion, and even of the delay of the enrollment. And this will even trying to amplify for the future financial losses. I believe that still was having a big risk, that we cannot just try to take in this as some of those making on this. And just we believe that our choice, not only for studying, we can also try to gain for them, give the students, give those people more experiences, and trying to keep in. There was no risks of trying to forgetting about the lessons, even trying to have some of those on in their academic progress, and even with no risk about trying to waste it for the whole entire year. But for all of the gap year, for the good things actually are being small and also being shallow. Our opponent ignored the big cost, and also for every student. So we believe that this is how we actually was being outweighed more than our opponents. And just other team also
that actually the gap year volunteer work and also trying to give in the students experiences and even help it for their future and even trying to stressing and also strengthening for their ability and for their money and jobs and actually sounds good, but the real cost of their gap year is actually the biggest thing they actually ignored. For volunteer and short work, probably you can try to bring a little experiences, but this experience is simple and awesome, but not being that much being useful in their future study. And we believe that we can try to get a better experiences without the gap year when we're trying to maintain for both. We can do volunteer works on holidays. We can try to make in the money on trying to solve on the part-time job. So therefore, this is actually being much more useful experiences. And when we're trying to have the gap year, they may even cause for some of those risks about wasting for the whole entire year. And not everyone can find their ultimate goal and trying to straight go into their interest. And there was no saying that there was having the fact of how we are trying to make in this people trying to mentioning and also standing for the first place. So therefore, we believe that there's not much of those insurance for them trying to be saying it out. And just we deny that actually gap year is being helpful, but harm actually outweighs than the advantages. So therefore, we believe that this is how we are going trying to prove it on today. And just also, when one of the speeches our opponent mentioned that even though they're actually wrong, that they're actually outweighing more, this is actually one of the 13 of those was trying to make a mistake during their speech because it actually was the ones trying supporting for their contention, but it actually was trying to denying themselves of saying it's wrong. That we believe that actually from the 13 of the aspects, we should be winning this debate. And judge, now, finally looking back to the ultimate goal, we believe that in this world, outweighs more, that we have concerning for more, and also kind of combining for learning and also study experiences during for the whole entire college and even though the holidays. So the gap year, it has a lot of those insurance and also the anxiety. We can not just trying to 100% of trying to better for a lot of those other students. So therefore, based on all of those, still please vote for opposition. Thank you.
I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Just a bit of characterization before I begin. I'd like to reiterate, as my team has said down the bench, gap years just don't have to be a full year. I think that is a bit of a misunderstanding on side opposition's part. But I think gap years, it just because it's just a break, right? It does not mean a year. There are things like partial gap years, for example, there are half years, right? The length of a gap year is entirely dependent on the person and like who takes it, right? So I just like to reiterate, it's not a full year. It's not necessarily a full year, right? So at the end of this debate, I think side opposition had two main win paths. They also say, first of all, they had to prove to us like gap years were just like so unnecessary and just had too many burdens. And secondly, they had to prove to us why like these benefits of gap years that we do provide, they just can't be replicated elsewhere, right? I think on this first win path, they tell us firstly that gap years only provide us really basic skills that just aren't necessary for students to take that break, right? And I think that this is like just inherently untrue, as we told you again and again. For example, there are many examples of skills that aren't just basic that you can get from gap years. For example, for like real world problem solving, such as like figuring out transportation, like visas, housing while traveling abroad, or like leadership and team management skills, like leading a volunteer project in a developing community, etc. Right? I think none of these skills are probably going to be developed better and like quicker in our world when we do like support gap years and more students are taking gap years because this is just like low stakes failure, which means that if they do like fail in university, obviously it's like a really big project because they know everything in university counts. However, in a gap year, if they do fail, it's probably going to be like a learning opportunity, and it doesn't really like matter and like have domino effects, right? I think this encourages experimentation and like just like and it's probably like better for like students' character. I think secondly, they're probably going to be, because the gap years are like a focus, right? It's 100% dedicated time. It means that like it's just a time for like personal growth and self-efficacy, right? So students were probably more likely to try harder during that time just because it was just one like time like solely dedicated to like developing a skill. I think lastly, it's just like helped with like more immersive real world contests that accelerate learning. So I think even if there are basic skills at the end of the day, the point of gap years is about it having like customization, right? And having that autonomy and control. That was already a benefit in itself because it just allows for identity exploration and character building. I think secondly, they push for us that only rich people can experience gap years. I think, as we told you again, this is inherently untrue because gap years are currently being made more accessible. For example, we have scholarships which can support students from all economic backgrounds, right? It's like we have it can be funded. There are many funded volunteering from non-government association organizations, right? And I think that was something that was going to be made more accessible. I also think that gap years don't have to involve necessarily luxury traveling, right? They can work locally in or volunteer in the community, and they can still develop skills from there. I think lastly, in our world, we're able to help this because by supporting the rise of gap years, this can lead to higher quality gap year programs. Why is this true? I think increased demand, which really drives like program improvement, especially for like low SES, right? This means like there's probably in the long-term impacts, it's going to be more structured support, which reduces barriers. It means that there's going to be more networks and opportunities for low SES, which actually help them because to connect students to like, and help them with like real career skills. I think that was a benefit they were never able to get. Lots of what it tells us, there's going to be psychological pressure. I think that this was just probably like Andrew, we proved to you that like gap years do build adaptability and resilience, which means students do like experience with a wide range of emotions, including stress, which means when they come back, they're probably less likely to be stressed, right? So therefore, second win for us, how and they tell us that how are these benefits, like why these benefits are not able to be replicated. I think first of all, there are benefits that we get, for example, like full autonomy and self-direction, which are such as planning a 6 to 12 month itinerary with personal, professional, and volunteering goals. I think that was something you were never able to get from university clubs and campus programs, because campus programs and clubs, they do have schedules, they do have faculty oversight and just predefined rules that you like that just allow less autonomy. I think secondly, like there's this like low stakes real world failure, right? Which means that like mistakes in uni just directly affect things like your GPA, your future opportunities. So students were less likely to try different things that they can try in gap years. And I think lastly, the fact that university is just fundamentally in that academic and learning focused environment. And I think getting out that was extremely important for students because they were just able to experience something just completely new and get many more benefits. And I think that was something we get on our side. So at the end of this, I think we get long-term benefits of just students having higher quality gap year programs and like high quality learning, because when they come back they're going to be less stressed from before, because they just like reduce the burning from the gap year. And lastly, they just like are able to get a range of skills from these gap years. So proud to propose.